Welcome to Cheater Fallout. Let us get started with today's story. It was an ordinary Sunday, the kind of day where the house feels still, as if the world outside has agreed to leave you alone. Soft music drifted from Naomi's phone, and the two of us were standing at the dining table folding laundry. It was simple, repetitive work, but I didn't mind. I liked the rhythm of it. Naomi held up one of my shirts, folded it neatly, and without looking at me, she said, "Sometimes I think I should have married Lucas instead." I froze, hands still clutching a towel. I thought maybe she was joking, a careless comment that would be followed by a half smile or a quick laugh. But her face didn't change. She kept folding, her tone flat, as if she had just mentioned the weather. "What did you just say?" I asked. She glanced at me, unflinching. Lucas had ambition. He always knew what he wanted. He made me feel seen. She gestured slightly around the room at the laundry, the mugs, the quiet house. "This our life. It feels like you've settled." Her words hung heavy in the air. I waited for her to soften them, to backtrack, but she didn't. My chest tightened, but I didn't let my voice rise. I just looked at her for a long moment. Then I placed the towel down, turned, and walked out of the room without a word. I didn't throw an accusation. Didn't ask why. I went downstairs to the office and sat in the dark. My silence was sharper than anything I could have said. That night, I didn't return to our bed. I stayed in the office, lying on the small couch. I didn't tell her why. She didn't come to ask, and that was when it hit her. My silence wasn't anger. It was a distance she hadn't expected, one that began the moment she said she should have married another man. The next morning, Naomi moved around the kitchen like nothing had happened. She poured coffee, asked if I wanted toast. I answered with a nod. Nothing more. For 3 days, we lived like that. Brief exchanges, surface-level talk about bills or groceries, but nothing deeper. She didn't bring up what she'd said, and I didn't ask her to explain. It was as if we were both testing how long the silence could last before it broke us. One evening, I walked past the living room and noticed her laptop open on the couch. I didn't mean to look, but the screen glowed with an unsent draft. The subject line read, "Catching Up." The name below it was Lucas Reed. The message was short, just a few lines about maybe meeting for coffee sometime, about how she'd been thinking of him lately. It wasn't sent yet. Maybe she had typed it and stopped. Maybe she had meant to erase it, but she hadn't. I closed the laptop gently and said nothing. That night at dinner, I finally spoke. "Naomi, we need counseling. If you're serious about this marriage, that's what I want." She set her fork down, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You're overreacting. It was just a thought. Everyone wonders about the past sometimes." "Then prove it," I said evenly. "Sit in a room with me and talk it through with someone who can help us get past it." She leaned back in her chair, exhaling hard. "Not right now. Work is insane. After the next quarter, maybe?" I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just left the kitchen. The truth was clear in the way she delayed. She didn't want a solution. She wanted the idea of Lucas alive in her head, even if it was eating us from the inside out. I didn't push. I didn't plead. My silence was already saying more than enough. The first time it slipped into the open was at dinner with friends. We were at a small Italian place downtown, with another couple sharing wine and plates of pasta. Conversation moved easily until Naomi brought up Lucas. "He just launched another startup in Seattle," she said, smiling like it was breaking news. "Already got investors lined up. He's always had that drive, you know." The table went quiet for a second. Our friends glanced at me, waiting for a reaction. I kept my fork moving, never lifting my eyes. Naomi laughed lightly, trying to cover the tension, but the damage was done. "When we got home," I asked, "did you need to say that in front of them?" She frowned, pulling off her coat. "What are you talking about?" "I was just sharing news. Everyone knows him." "You weren't sharing. You were admiring." Her eyes narrowed. "You're reading into everything." It was casual. I let it go. A week later, she came home late. 2 hours past dinner, she dropped her bag by the door, smelling faintly of wine. "Where were you?" I asked. "Alumni committee," she said quickly. "We're planning the spring fundraiser." "And who chaired it?" I asked. She hesitated just long enough for the answer to be obvious. "Lucas." But it was nothing, Jeremy. Just logistics. I nodded once. I told you I wouldn't compete with a ghost. That hasn't changed. She stepped closer, voice rising. You're making this bigger than it is. You're being dramatic. I didn't answer. I didn't shout. I walked past her upstairs and closed the bedroom door. In that silence, I knew she felt it. The more she filled the air with excuses, the more weight my quiet carried. And slowly, she was beginning to realize what that meant. The museum fundraiser came 2 weeks later. Naomi insisted we attend. Her alumni group was hosting, and she wanted to show face. I put on a suit, straightened my tie, and drove us downtown without a word. The event was all polished floors, clinking glasses, and small talk. Halfway through the evening, I spotted him. Lucas Reed. Tall, confident. The kind of presence that drew people in. He wasn't larger than life, though, just another man in a tailored jacket holding a drink, laughing with a group of donors. Naomi stiffened when she saw me notice him. Don't, she whispered, but I crossed the room anyway. Jeremy Cole, I said, extending a hand. Naomi's husband. Lucas smiled easily. Of course. Good to meet you. His grip was firm, professional. We exchanged a few polite words. Work. The fundraiser. Seattle's weather. He was measured, grounded. The picture Naomi had painted of him as some unstoppable force didn't match the man standing in front of me. Take care of her, he said casually before someone else pulled him away. When I turned back, Naomi was watching from across the room, her expression tight. On the drive home, she broke the silence. You had no right to corner him like that. I didn't corner him. I introduced myself. It was invasive. You embarrassed me. I kept my eyes on the road. No, Naomi. What's embarrassing is pretending a memory is better than a marriage. She said nothing after that. At the house, I walked upstairs, pulled a small overnight bag from the closet, and packed enough for a few days. Naomi stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for me to speak. But I didn't. I zipped the bag, walked past her, and left without a word. That night, I stayed at Oliver Grant's apartment, an old friend from college. I didn't explain much, just that I needed space. He nodded, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and didn't ask questions. And that silence was louder than any argument I could have staged. Oliver's apartment was small but uncluttered. The kind of place where everything had a purpose. It suited me. I settled into his spare room with a suitcase and a quiet routine. No late-night arguments. No cautious silences over dinner. Just calm. I started waking early again, running along the river before work. I cooked simple meals, read in the evenings, and realized how much of myself I had been shelving to keep our house running on autopilot. The absence of noise was a relief. Work picked up too. My mentor, Marco Alvarez, pushed me into leading a client pitch I'd been avoiding. You've got the focus for it now, he told me. Don't waste the window. I took the challenge and found myself sharper, more present, as if the constant static in my head had finally cleared. Naomi, meanwhile, texted occasionally. Short lines. Are you coming back? Can we talk? I didn't mean it the way it sounded. Once she called and asked, Are you seeing someone else? I let the question hang before replying, No. But I'm not waiting either. After a month, I filed for legal separation. No drama, no heated accusations, just paperwork and signatures. Naomi didn't fight it, at least not right away. The strange thing was the loneliness didn't crush me. It clarified me. I was no longer bending myself into shapes to be enough for someone who kept glancing over her shoulder at another man. Oliver raised his glass one night. To silence, he said. I clinked mine against his. For the first time in years, I understood what peace felt like. One evening, I got a calendar alert I didn't recognize. Naomi and I still shared one for bills and appointments, and this entry popped up under her name, Coffee with L. I didn't need a full spelling to know who it was. 2 days later, she called me. Her voice was controlled, almost rehearsed. I had coffee with Lucas. It was about a job lead, that's all. I wanted you to hear it from me. I let a pause settle between us. Thank you for telling me. That's it, she asked. That's it. I ended the call there. The next morning, I met with my attorney and signed the final separation papers. No more waiting. No halfway steps. It was time to cut clean. When Naomi received the documents, she showed up at Oliver's building, knocking on the glass door downstairs. She still had my location from before, and I hadn't bothered to turn it off. I didn't go down. I just watched from the window as she waited, then finally walked away. The papers moved through the system. Accounts divided, responsibilities split. Everything measured out with precision. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And once I chose, there was no going back. It was a rainy Thursday when Naomi showed up again. She looked smaller than I remembered, shoulders slumped, hair pulled back without care. I opened the door but didn't step aside right away. "Jeremy," she said, voice cracking. "I need to talk." I let her in. She stood in the middle of the room, dripping from the rain, eyes fixed on the floor. "I saw him again," she admitted. "Lucas." It wasn't planned. We crossed paths at a networking event. We barely spoke, but she hesitated, searching for the words. "He hasn't changed. Same big ideas, same charm, same empty promises." For a second I saw it clearly. How he never stayed, never followed through, and I realized I'd been holding on to an illusion. I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "Took you long enough." Tears welled in her eyes. "I was wrong, Jeremy. You were the one who stayed. You showed up. You built a life with me while I kept looking backward. I broke something real because I was chasing what wasn't." She stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I didn't move. "I don't want to lose this," she said. "I don't want to lose you. We can try again. Counseling. Whatever it takes, I'll do it now." Her words were heavy, but I didn't feel the pull I once would have. Months ago, I might have clung to that apology like a lifeline. But standing there, I saw her differently. I wasn't angry. I wasn't desperate. I was steady. "I believe you," I said quietly. "I believe you see it now. But I'm not the man I was when you first said his name. I don't need to prove myself anymore. And I don't want to go back to the version of me who begged for your attention." She shook her head, tears spilling down her face. "Don't say that, please." But the truth had already settled between us. The power had shifted, and there was no way back to the old balance. We met a week later at the lawyer's office to sign the last of the documents. The room was quiet. Naomi's hands trembled as she picked up the pen. Mine didn't. She looked at me before signing. "Jeremy, are you sure this is what you want?" I nodded once. Yes. Her eyes filled, but she didn't argue. She just signed, slid the papers back across the table, and whispered, "I'm sorry." There was nothing more to say. I drove back to my apartment, unlocked the door, and stepped into the stillness. I poured coffee, sat down at the small table, and let the silence settle. After the papers were signed, Naomi packed her things and moved into a smaller place across town. I stayed in the apartment we once shared. At first, it felt like a museum of a life that had collapsed. Her perfume still on the dresser, her books lined on the shelves. But week by week, I cleared the space. It felt familiar. Months earlier, Naomi's words had shattered that calm. I should have married Lucas. Back then, I had walked away without a word. That silence had been the beginning of the end. Now, sitting alone, I understood it had also been the beginning of something else. A new version of myself. One that didn't need her validation. One that no longer fought shadows from her past. I thought of Naomi, of Lucas, of everything that had unraveled. No hatred lingered, only clarity. I closed my eyes, took a slow sip of coffee.